When it comes to planning a retreat, there's ways to get it to go from average to incredibly transformative. Welcome to Retreat Boss, where we speak about inspired travel for fun, transformation, and profit. Guest experts will give you their tips and tricks on creating the most impactful retreats, both for you and your clients. Whether you want a meditative getaway, a wellness trip, or a business escapade, we provide you with the best advice in organizing and hosting a tremendous event. Join Catherine Kontos as she talks with fellow experts about creating exclusive and successful retreats. Dive deep into the most unique activities, the best destinations to visit, and the most uplifting trips out there that you can discover. Here is your host, Catherine Kontos. This is going to be interesting. Jonathan DePotter is the founder and CEO of Behold Retreats, a bespoke wellness service that facilitates journeys of self-discovery and transformation supported by the scientifically proven benefits of plant medicine therapy. Jonathan, welcome to Retreat Boss. I'm so excited to interview you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Catherine. It's great to be connected and looking forward to our conversation.
So plant medicine, I've been hearing so much about it lately. I studied neuroscience in university. So this is something that really, really interests me and the benefits to it. I know here where I am, psychologists and psychiatrists are actually using it medically. So it's not like this thing that, oh, let's just, have some fun with some drugs. It's really something that could really change and alter your life, from all the studies I've been reading and all the stuff that I've been seeing as well. So I'm really, really excited and interested in talking about this topic and how it could benefit people, especially during a retreat experience. So please tell me what your experience has been and what made you shift into this world of psychedelics?
Yeah, and I love that you used the term plant medicine as we kicked off, because the word psychedelics, I guess it's got a little bit of a hangover, shall we say, an association from the 60s, and so I think plant medicine is such a beautiful way to frame this work. So for me personally, it kind of my story winds back about 5 years. And I was living in Hong Kong at the time. I was kind of quote unquote living the life as a corporate management consultant, leading a team of about 120 people. Was ticking all the boxes in terms of what one might describe as a modern successful life. But I guess, I just reached a point where I recognized that the next promotion, the next client, the next deal wasn't going to bring me any incremental improvement or joy or just quality of life. And so I remember looking myself in the mirror one day, and I was an atheist at the time, and thinking, this can't be it. There has to be something more to life. And so that in essence was what triggered me to take a year off. So I took a year and traveled through South America for the majority of that year. And as part of that, a couple of friends came and joined me in Peru. And we went through what was a couple of the most challenging days of our lives there in an ayahuasca retreat. And that really began me on a spiritual journey, on my own, personal development, my own spiritual development, and opened so many doors, so many benefits over the past 5 years. And it's a humbling learning journey. And I made so many mistakes along the way. And so, as I learned more and more about the mistakes that I was making, became really inspired and motivated to help others find an easier path and a more beneficial path than the one that I walked.
So this is what motivated you to start your business.
Yes, exactly.
So tell me about your company a little bit.
Yeah, so we work predominantly with leaders, executives, and what we call forward thinkers. So we try to get to people who are high impact, people who are, in a position where they're ready for a big personal shift, right? So they're ready for that transformation. They're ready for some healing. Maybe they're ready to deepen their spirituality, elevate their consciousness. We do group retreats as well as private retreats. And for most of our clients, we take a more holistic approach to this work. So we don't just do the week retreat, but we actually do 3 weeks before the retreat to help them prepare. And we do 3 weeks after the retreat to help them integrate the experience, because these are very powerful experiences. So the 3 weeks beforehand, we really help our clients get clear on their future self. Each and any one of us can be any person that we want to be. It depends upon who we want to be and getting clear upon that. And so when we get really clear upon that, then we can begin to surface, okay, well, if that's your future self, then what are the limiting thought patterns? What are the limiting beliefs? What are the limiting behaviors that you're currently facing that is keeping that future self away from you today? And so we coach our clients, we have therapists as well, and really help them do the mental and emotional work to understand the patterns of mind that are not serving them and understand the emotions that they need to be willing to release out from the physical body. And we teach them those tools ahead of working with the plant medicine, so that when they actually step into ceremony, when they start working with these powerful tools, whether it's ayahuasca or psilocybin or 5-MeO DMT, bufo, that they're actually prepared. They actually know what it is that they're trying to achieve, because they know what their future self is, and they know these tools that they need to work with in order to get the benefits they're looking for.
So someone who is fearful, of what can happen, because we don't know, right? We don't know. We're taking a drug to alter our consciousness to reach it. Like, how do you know you're not gonna, just, I don't know, something wrong can happen? How can you ensure that of that person? Has there ever been any bad experiences, like not bad experiences, but something that was that could hurt someone? I'm sure people are thinking this, okay, I'd like to try this. This sounds interesting, but can I be hurt instead of, the opposite, which is what we're trying to achieve?
Yeah, this could be a 1 hour, 2 hour podcast in of itself, and certainly there's many layers to the answer to that. The first thing that I would say is that safety is first and foremost in terms of how we serve our clients. This ecosystem has exploded over the past 5 years. When I first went on a retreat 5 years ago, there was about 15 retreat centers that one could choose from, and so I chose the best retreat center that I could find at the time. Now there's about 250 retreat centers. So the number of options that are out there has just exploded. Now, what's interesting is that if you go to any retreat aggregator in this space, what you'll find is that universally all of the retreats are being rated as 5 stars. So that tells us a couple of things. Number one, it tells us that people are having very deep, profound, positive experiences. And number two, it also tells us that people are not able to discern quality. And this was a large part of my journey. I was going around to these different retreats, the best rated retreats that I could find, different medicines, different locations around the world. And because I didn't know what good looked like, I wasn't able to really distinguish between them. And I now recognize that, in fact, all of those that I went to were not working at the highest level in relation to what is possible with this quality, with this work. Now, I don't say that to be negative. I don't say that to be judgmental. I genuinely believe that most of the people who work in this space are genuinely doing the very best that they can. It's just that this work is very complex, right? Because you're dealing with the human, we're dealing with the human condition. We're dealing with the trauma, we're dealing with the overwhelm, with the stress, we're dealing with the mental, the emotional, the energetic, the physical. And all of these elements are coming together with these very powerful medicines. And so it's very important that we do high quality safety screening. So we do very in-depth screening for mental, for the emotional, as well as for the physical, ahead of inviting clients to our retreats. And then it's also very important that the practitioners who are doing this work, that they have a very strong grounding and basis, and preferably decades of experience doing this work. And there's many aspects to this work in terms of taking care of people mentally and emotionally, preparing them for the journeys, facilitating the actual plant medicine journeys themselves, and then helping them make sense out of what are these, very powerful amplifying experiences.
I love the fact that you do have it's a 7-week program.
That's right.
Yeah. I love the fact that you have the pre-retreat, the retreat, and then the post-retreat. I think all retreats should be actually made that way, because really to get the full benefits of the transformation that you're going to experience, and not only during the retreat but even afterwards, to hold on to that transformation, because it's very easy to just go back to our habits. I think it's very important that people do have a program in place, just like you do, before, to really understand why are you doing this retreat? What are your goals? And then, to experience that transformation, which is, incredible. And especially with plant medicine, I haven't done it. I can just imagine what it would do, even just for me, and then have the follow up afterwards to make sure the person's okay, that they're on track. And it's like being the parent, and nurturing that person, into this new, they're like a butterfly, really. They're coming out of their cocoon. Yeah, I really love the fact that you do have a 7-week program. What does your team consist of that are involved in this? Who's the team?
Yeah, and I just before I answer that, I just wanted to build upon what you said there, because it's so important. And these medicines really respond to intentionality. So the more deeply we anchor our understanding of our future self and belief in that future self, then the medicine is able to respond to that. It's able to reciprocate to that deeply held intentionality. And so preparing for that mentally, physically, emotionally, energetically ahead of the retreat plays such a strong role in people getting the benefits from the actual ceremonies themselves. I say to clients that, my belief of this work now is it's 80% mental and emotional work, which is what sets up the 20% with plant medicine to be as transformational as it can be. And the piece that I often add to that is that, look, psychedelics or plant medicine in of itself isn't necessarily positive. It's neutral, right? Look at any psychedelic scene or psychedelic community. It doesn't necessarily reflect those communities, God bless them, don't necessarily reflect the energies that, say, you or I might aspire to. So it's not that plant medicine or psychedelics in of itself, it's positive. It's how we use this tool that makes such a fundamental difference. And so, through my years of mistakes, to kind of continue on with, the team, through my years of mistakes, what I recognize is that, number one, I wasn't doing the mental and emotional work because no one was guiding me. No one was telling me that I needed to do this work around these retreats. So intuitively, I just felt like there was something that was missing. I wasn't getting the deeper breakthroughs that were available. And it's because I didn't know my own mental and emotional blind spots, because by definition, they're blind spots, and we need someone else to actually mirror our ego structure to help us see the things that we need to see. So as I started working with a coach, then I was able to zero in on those blockages, I suppose, that I had, and actually in ceremony target my efforts and my breakthroughs in relation to the ego structure versus things that are bypassing. So number one, we have coaches and therapists on our team. Number two, retreat facilitators, right? So the people who actually bring the people together, they're really energized by bringing a great group of people together, and keep that energy throughout the course of the week, which you and I know isn't always the easiest thing to do. And then you have the actual what we might describe as medicine men or shamans or healers, and those are the people who are actually doing the specific medicine work. So and then obviously there's a much broader infrastructure that comes together around that, of course, in terms of the whole team and the cooks and the chefs and the people maybe out doing the horseback riding on one of the days, et cetera, et cetera. So that's obviously a bit more retreat specific, but those kind of gives you a bit of a flavor in terms of the team that comes together in order to serve our clients.
Amazing. Tell me, what does a day or a few days of this experience feel like, look like, for someone who wants to have a better idea, visualize it? What would they be experiencing on a typical day?
Yeah, sure. So typically over the space of, say, a week retreat, we typically do 1 week retreats. We would do, say, 3 or 4 ceremonies over that duration. As I mentioned before, we predominantly work with 3 medicines: psilocybin, ayahuasca, and 5-MeO-DMT. For people who are, brand new, we would typically do psilocybin. Might be a good place to start, an easier place to start. Ayahuasca is a very powerful experience. The underlying molecule is DMT, dimethyltryptamine, also known as the spirit molecule. And then we have 5-MeO-DMT, which is recognized as 4 to 6 times more powerful than ayahuasca. So it's the underlying molecule is also referred to as the God molecule. So very, very powerful experience. I actually think it's easier as an experience than ayahuasca, even though it's recognized to be more powerful than ayahuasca. The little self, the egoic self, just really has no chance with 5-MeO DMT. So it's a very powerful non-dual experience. So depending upon the medicine that's being worked with, we tend to have quite a bit of space within our retreats. So we don't pack out the schedule too much. It's important to have plenty of time for resting and reflection and journaling around these very powerful plant medicine ceremonies. With psilocybin or 5-MeO DMT, we would typically do the ceremonies during the day. With ayahuasca, you tend to be quite photosensitive, so we do the ceremonies at night, typically starting around 7 p.m. and typically goes for 4 to 6 hours. Would be roughly the same for psilocybin. And with 5-MeO DMT, it's a very short experience, very powerful, timeless, but short. It's 10 to 20 minutes in human time, as I often refer to it. And so, over the space of a retreat, we would do some yoga. We would do some meditation, often some nature hiking, depending upon the location, maybe some horseback riding, as I mentioned before. We might go down to the beach if there's a local beach and paint ourselves up in clay. It really depends a little bit upon the retreat, but we like to leave plenty of time around the ceremonies themselves for people to integrate, to some sharing circles, and get to know each other better, of course, as well.
How do you see this working for corporate people? Because I did notice, through reading about you, that you do use this in the corporate world as well, that people are coming to you. And maybe even, I'm wondering, even if athletes I would think they would really benefit from this.
Yeah, the NHL and NFL and UFC as well are looking at this as a potential treatment option for TBI, traumatic brain injury, which are quite, pervasive, unfortunately, in those three sports. In terms of teams, so we've hosted a couple people from the same team, but we haven't done any corporate retreats as yet. There's all sorts of risks, as you might recognize. So there's a lot that's happening underground that we know of. I think it's still a little bit early for most companies. So for companies who are smaller in size, more progressive and more international, I think there's a market. But I also think it's super sensitive, right? So we have heard stories about people being pressured into participating in these types of ceremonies by virtue of the fact that their CEO or maybe a couple members of the leadership team are super excited about it and want to go do it as a team, which is really, it's not so beautiful, right? So it's very important that if, as and when corporates or companies are considering doing a leadership retreat or a retreat, that's done in a way that honors the individual decision making that people might like to, whether or not they're ready for this work, and so that the whole team is brought on a journey together, regardless of whether or not everyone's doing the actual plant medicine work. So, that I see is very important as this work does enter that world, because I think it can be a very powerful tool for people who are in leadership teams in particular to get the ego out of the way, re-energize, reset a vision together, and get really excited about 10x goals and that sort of thing, and creative in terms of their vision together. And once we get the ego out of the way, it's amazing what the human beings can do together.
Absolutely. And from what I've been reading also, in here locally, where psychiatrists are using this, they're using it on people where are suffering from depression, anxiety, that nothing else has worked, and they're seeing them be healed through using plant medicine. And that's what makes me so interested in it, because this is something that a lot of people suffer from. And if this is something that can help them finally, because being, depressed and having no more hope as to anything helping you is very, very sad, like, lack of a better word, like they feel hopeless. And now there's this well, it's not even a concept, it's happening, right? That can actually help him, and people and psychiatrists, professionals, like the medical world is recognizing this. And that's what I find amazing about it. And that's why I'm so intrigued by it. I can imagine someone who is just looking to heal trauma, especially, to like unleash that and get it out of them and experience this. I really love what you're doing. Like, I think it's something that people are really going to start looking into a little more. Of course, they're hesitant at the beginning because they don't know much about it, obviously. And you are playing with the brain, right? In the end. That's what it is.
Absolutely.
So people are like, wait a second, do I really want to go down that route? Right.
Uh, yeah, well, and there's a few things that I think we can talk about in relation to that. So the first thing I'd share is that the way that we have defined modern health, I think, in the current paradigm, mental health in the current paradigm is completely flawed. What we've done is we've set the bar for mental health at such a low level, and what we've said is that anyone who's below that level needs to go get help. And they just need to go see a doctor or a psychiatrist, or maybe go on a plant medicine retreat, and then that will get them back up above this bar. And at that point in time, they can get back to work and carry on living life. And everyone that's above this bar is fine; they can just carry on. And that's fundamentally not it. The way that I see this now is that everyone is at a current level of consciousness, and everyone can improve their level of consciousness, and there's no upper bound to that. So if I wind back 5 years, I was doing good in life. I was, by any modern definition, I was doing really well. But I actually now see that I was really sick. Like, there was so much room for improvement to the quality of life and quality of cognition that you could not have convinced me under any sort of rational argument. Like, I just thought that everything was good in my life from from an outside in perspective. And this is where I think it comes, some of the neuroscience is so important in relation to this work. The National Science Foundation recently did research that showed that your typical person has between 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day. Almost all of their thoughts are egoic thoughts, so I, me, my. 95% of the thoughts are repetitive, so they're the same thoughts over and over again. And for most people, 85% of those thoughts are negative. So we think a lot, we think only about ourselves, we think the same things about ourselves, and mostly bad things about ourselves. So there's a sickness of the mind that is so deeply entrenched that most people, when you share those statistics with them, they don't even recognize that those statistics apply to them. They immediately is like, oh, that's so sad that other people have that. And then they say, oh, I should have done this, not that. And you go, wait a second. You just said you should have done this. You're actually beating yourself up in that moment. And so we have these negative self-parenting patterns that are so deeply entrenched, and typically a hangover of what we saw from our parents, how they spoke to us, how we spoke to ourselves, or some childhood trauma. And so, some negative self-belief around us not being good enough or us not being lovable. And that stuff runs deep for virtually everyone, unfortunately. And so this is again, what I think this work really represents is healing a lot of that early childhood trauma and overcoming the hangover from those things that are taking shape in our brains and damaging us in terms of quality of everyday life.
So we only use 10% of our brain, right? Supposedly.
I would.
Does this tap into like an extra percent?
So I would frame it slightly differently, which is that these medicines are neurogenetics, so they do grow new neurons in the brain, which used to be thought impossible. So that's one of the things that's beneficial. The other thing that it does is it dampens down the default mode network of the brain. Now, the default mode network of the brain is what allows a high degree of compartmentalization. So if you've ever met someone who says, "I love my wife," and he's cheating on his wife,
right?
Well, that's an example of actually a physically compartmentalized brain. Those are two incongruent thoughts that are coexisting within a single consciousness. That shouldn't be possible. And so when people have these experiences and you dampen down this network of the brain, then what you can see in an MRI scan is a massive degree of interconnectivity between regions of the brain that normally don't communicate. And so this reconciliation that takes place across the brain is what leads to these realizations, these breakthroughs. Oh, I can't say this thing and then go do this other thing because it's not consistent. It's not right. Consistent with how a human being should live. And so that's a large part of what leads to the healing and the realizations.
That is interesting. That is very interesting. I love that. I obviously they've done studies where before and after MRI, like scanning or anything to see this, right? In order for you to see that there's been new synapses with that's incredible. I love it. Oh my God, I love this topic so much.
Yeah, what unfortunately tends to happen is that, so you can see this in the brain, you know, if you do an MRI scan when psilocybin is active, and the challenge, the opportunity is to keep that degree of
Right.
interconnectivity. So unfortunately, you know, as you said before, post retreat, people are like, wow, I feel so great, I'm amazing, everything's, and then 3 weeks later down the road, they're just like, oh, everything's exactly back to normal. And so that's why it's so important to actually know what you're trying to rewire in your mind. You can go and have a whole bunch of rewiring done, and then what tends to happen is that our we're overusing a very small subset of neural patterns, neural pathways, right? And the reason for that is we're all overwhelmed. We're all stressed by the complexity, overwhelming complexity of modern life. And so as a kind of energy efficient mechanism, energy efficient response to how overwhelmed we are, we begin to use patterns of thinking in order to just deal with all this complexity. And we all know people in our lives that like are so patterned in their thinking that if we were to present them some new piece of information, we actually already know how they're going to respond to that new piece of information. So they've lost their neuroplasticity. They're deterministic in their thinking. They've lost their brain function in essence, which is terribly sad. And so when we actually know and recognize the patterns of mind that are no longer serving us, then we can step into these ceremonies. We can have this rewiring take place, and we have a much higher chance of actually being able to overcome these deeply entrenched neural patterns that are overused on the day by day, and actually begin to reinforce and use these new pathways that we know are possible and are more a reflection of who we truly are and our brain's true capacity, as opposed to, you know, just the overwhelm.
Right. Just like we need exercise every day or every second day to build a muscle, it's the same thing with the mind. You want to, strengthen that synapse, that connection, in order for it to bypass eventually the one that you don't really like, that's keeping you in the bad habits. And people don't understand that it's a daily thing. It's a daily practice. I'm not going to eat that chocolate. I'm not going to eat that chocolate. Just to be funny, you have to say it every day. And after like 6 weeks, which is where habits are formed, new habits are formed, guess what? You're not really craving that chocolate anymore. And you don't even care for it anymore. Where before you're like, I have to have that chocolate, so I'm just,
Yeah.
just putting it at a different level for so people can understand that this is how it is with what you're doing. And with anything mental, you have to practice it before, during the retreat, and after the retreat, and you have to continue doing it. It's a discipline that you have to, and eventually it just becomes your thing. You don't even realize that you're doing it anymore, because it's your daily routine or your daily habit now that has been newly I don't know, connected, and it's strengthened enough for you not to have to go back to your innate ways of bad habits. um Someone who's experiencing one of the drugs, pick one, whichever one you feel is for a beginner, let's say, what would they experience during that 10 or 20 minutes example, like you were saying before? What would that feel like for them?
Yeah, so let's talk about the powerful one, if you don't mind, because that's the 10 to 20 minute one,
Right.
and I think it's fun to speak about. So that's the God molecule, Bufo 5-MeO DMT. It's it's gaining a lot in popularity because it's a cleaner medicine, so it's not so hard on the physical body. There's no bucket required, as is the case with ayahuasca. So this medicine is smoked, and it takes effect within 5 to 10 seconds.
Mhm.
And reality itself breaks apart as we know it in front of our very eyes. And we are joined during a breakthrough experience, and we are joined with the universe. So it's a complete non-dual experience. So subject object is no more, time is no more, space is no more. There is just, we experience oneness with the universe, and we can, I suppose, validate for ourselves that we are in fact part of the universe, and that it was the illusion of the separate self was just that, an illusion. And so it's a very powerful experience. Once people understand that, they tend to be able to, number one, release a lot of lower level emotions, and number two, really deepens their meditation practice, and number three, they've seen the light, as it were. And so it really has a deep impact in terms of our understanding of self, where we are not our minds, we are not our bodies. And it plays, returning the mind in particular to its rightful place in the hierarchy of self. is super important. In the modern paradigm, modern culture, we are so over identified with our minds. We think of ourselves as our minds, and we're not that. We're something much bigger, much more exciting. And so just giving people that experience that say, this is what you really are. You're way up here. And the mind is, it's a beautiful tool that you have that sits in your head, and you want to continue to use that beautiful tool and make it better, as you said. But it's not who you are. What you are is much, much bigger than that.
It sounds beautiful.
I would say it is, without a shadow of a doubt, the most beautiful experience that can be had.
Can it become addictive?
So all of these substances are, it's a good question to ask. All of these substances are medically defined as non-addictive, which is to say that you don't really come back from an experience with any of these medicines and say, let's go again. These are very powerful experiences. And there's a lot to bring back and embody and make sense of and integrate into self before we feel like going again. And so that's why, even doing 3 ceremonies over the space of a week, is a considerable amount of work. And that's why it's important to take a day between the ceremonies and bring it all back, bring it all down, do a lot of journaling, sharing, integration work, maybe some breath work, so that we can really ground ourselves and make sure that as we're peeling off more of these layers of the shame, the guilt, the fear, the grief, the apathy, the pride, the envy, the anger, we've all got many layers of all of these emotions trapped in our physical body. So as we're releasing these layers of these emotions, that we're taking the time to anchor this new understanding of ourselves before we go again into another ceremony. So no, they're not addictive. You do hear of cases of people who begin to use these medicines as a sort of escape. I always really encourage people to make sure that, each of these experiences is so profound that it should be serving as a new foundation for an improved quality of life. If that's not taking place and there's more medicine work, then I think, pause, reflection, reconsideration is in order. I'm always, with some of our clients, I always say, look, there's plenty of people out there who have done 20 years of, plant medicine ceremonies, plant medicine retreats. It's even become part of their ego. Oh, I've done 150 ceremonies. It's like, yeah, but you're still full of negativity and judgment, and within 30 seconds of a phone call, you're complaining about this and that. It's like, okay, let's take a step back. This isn't about quality. This isn't about plant medicine work. It's about improvements to quality of life. And so long as we keep that at the front and center of these experiences, then I think that's what honors the work, and that's what honors the human beings, because it should not be treated flippantly. And when it is, then the medicine responds in kind. There's plenty of people out there who are doing more and more of these plant medicines, these psychedelics, and unfortunately, not everyone is taking it seriously. And so, I've spoken with many smart professional people in high places who have done this in the wrong context and completely disassociated from the experience, and or had traumatic experiences because they were just at their friend's place on a Thursday, and friend was like, oh, have you ever tried this? And no, I haven't, but I've been meaning to. Oh, well, let's do it. And it's just not the right container for this work. It's deep, sacred work. We're talking about reaching places that have been spoken about by the mystics through the ages. These experiences are available to us. An acceleration of these experiences are available. And so treating these with the utmost, respect and care is so important.
Where are your retreats being offered right now?
So most of our work we do in Costa Rica, in Mexico, Netherlands, and Portugal, and we'll be reopening in Peru shortly.
Very nice. And where can people find you? Where can they get more information about you and what you do?
Yeah, we're on behold-retreats.com. There's no book now button on our website. We like to get to know each and every one of our clients. So, all of our events are by invitation only. So if this resonates, come through for a chat. We'll see if we're a good fit. If not, we like to try and put everyone in the best direction that we can. We're not a fit for everyone, but we try to make the best recommendations, in the highest interests of the individuals.
Jonathan, this was a very informative podcast and very interesting. I thank you so much for being here today and sharing your knowledge with everybody that's listening. I'm looking forward to getting to know more about your retreats, and the world of plant medicine. I don't know as much. I know more today than I did before, and I think it is a great way for people to, or a great option for people who want to go that route. So thank you very much for being here, and looking forward to getting to know your world a little more as time goes by. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
Take care. Thank you for listening to the Retreat Boss podcast. When it comes to achieving wellness and transformation, nothing is more effective and profound than a well-orchestrated retreat. Achieve huge revenue growth, one trip at a time. Want to learn more on expanding your business with retreats? Visit retreatboss.com, when profitable retreats are made easy. Be sure to leave a rating and subscribe to the show at retreatboss.com/podcast. Until next time, take care.